Every time this gentleman comes on, I always refer to him as the greatest radio host there ever was. I am being sincere about it. And one of the reasons is because he had little staples on his show that I thought were pretty clever and in some cases very applicable to what happened on the football field and in other sports. But really no better time to bring him in from the Todd Wright football or the Todd Wright fantasy football podcast. And of course the Todd Wright Toddcast. It's Todd Wright joining us. How you doing, Todd?
Good morning, Gill Alexander. Nice to be with you again.
Nice to be with you. I am, of course, referring to the Todd Wright objection, which I would love for you to explain because, boy, were there opportunities to use it this weekend.
Yeah, specifically, let me just highlight the Falcons-Bucks game where Arthur Smith, in my opinion, could have been the first to use the Todd Wright objection based on the Grady Jarrett roughing the passer call on Tom Brady, which essentially ended the game 3 minutes early. So the Todd Wright objection would be Arthur Smith pulls his entire team off the field. He sends them into the locker room. The referee comes over and says, "What are you doing? I need players out here," because the referee cannot allow a team to snap the ball if the other team doesn't have at least 10 on the field. We saw that after the Stephon Diggs touchdown against the Saints with that extra point. It's not allowed. And basically Arthur Smith can say to the referee, "You better get on the horn to New York and Goodell, because if you don't change that bad call and it's not fourth down, we're not playing the last 3 minutes." And that's it.
I love it.
For people that say today and last night, well, you can't go back and play the last 3 minutes of that game. Well, if you pull your team off the field and say we're done, the 3 minutes weren't played. It puts the NFL in a very uncomfortable spot. And as you and I have talked about, Gil, you use it once. That's it. You got one chance to use this and make it count. And that was an example of the Todd Wright objection. And I would love to see a coach in football or some sport use it someday.
Well, it occurs to me there's going to be a lot of people listening to that be like, come on, that can't happen. But it has happened in soccer. It has happened. So it would be amazing if it happened. But, those kinds of plays. And again, like I said, Todd, people are betting on this stuff. I think there's a lot of people that would love to have seen that, especially in that Atlanta-Tampa Bay game, where you're right, it stopped 3 minutes early. The other thing that I thought about last night was, and this is a big thing with you in fantasy, you eradicated very passionately. By the way, the Todd Wright the Todd Wright Fantasy Football Podcast this week, you said, "I told you so," and aside of something else, which we'll leave off this broadcast. But last night it reminded me of it. Travis Kelce scores 4 touchdowns. Darren Waller, strains his hamstring, so he can't play. But it triggered this for me. Explain.
One of the things that I talk about often, and I have for years, I've been doing the fantasy podcast now for 7+ years, is how I eliminated mandatory tight ends starting in all my leagues a decade ago. There were simply not enough productive tight ends in the NFL to go around, like there are quarterbacks or running backs or wide receivers or even kickers. And this year, so many owners are struggling with the tight end position. I've given you the solution for 7+ years. Have your commissioner click the box wide receiver tight end flex for a starter and not the mandatory tight end. It is that simple, and it keeps the value of a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews in fantasy football, because you have a position to play them, but if you don't have them, you can play a third wide receiver in that spot instead. It's something I solved years ago, and I don't understand why more fantasy owners and commissioners don't cut the cord on the mandatory tight end.
Yeah, there's just not enough good tight ends to go. Not enough productive tight ends to go around. Make it the flex like Todd Wright. Rule your fantasy league as a commissioner with an iron fist like Todd does, like Khrushchev or Brezhnev. All right, ready to do rapid fire? Ready to do this? Yes, one to start. Who you got this week?
Geno Smith. Through 5 weeks, he is the 5th best producing quarterback in fantasy football. Ain't writing back, Gil. 2 or more TDs passing in 4 of his 5 games. Highest completion percentage of starting quarterbacks who have played in all games this year at 75%. Productive wide receivers, a poor defense, so a lot of points needed. Arizona defense this week, he only started in 13% of Yahoo leagues last week. You start Geno Smith now.
All right, one to sit. I'm guessing this is more of a reflection of the offense in which he plays than the player himself, right?
Well, and we don't know how much he's playing hurt. I love Najee Harris because of how much he touches the ball, but you got to sit him until further notice. He started in 80% of Yahoo leagues last week. He only has 10 or more points in 1 of 5 games this year. Pickett threw the ball 52 times last week. They have the Bucs run defense this week. I think you just wait out Najee Harris until further notice.
Bench him, don't cut him. That's one to sit. How about one to cut? And this gentleman is in, you said 91% of Yahoo leagues, rostered in 91% of Yahoo leagues right now?
Gill, 3 weeks ago when we did this segment, in this spot, I said, you cut Juju Smith-Schuster. People apparently weren't listening. So since I told people to cut him, here's what he's done. 5 for 89, 5 for 46. Last night, 3 for 33. No touchdowns the entire season. A bad drop last night. You didn't listen to me 3 weeks ago. You ought to listen to me today.
All right, now this one is interesting because it dovetails nicely into our previous conversation. One to claim. Who you got here?
Taysom Hill. I have been playing him at my wide receiver tight end flex the last 2 weeks because in Yahoo leagues and some other leagues, he is actually listed as a quarterback / tight end. That's how much of a joke the fantasy tight end position is that they list Taysom Hill as a tight end. So I played him 2 weeks ago. I thought he might get me a red zone rushing touchdown. He did. I pressed it this past week. He was the highest scoring player in fantasy football. He was only started in 9% of Yahoo leagues. I was one of those 9%. He's the number 3 tight end in fantasy football according to Yahoo leagues, and he doesn't play tight end.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on this. You've always been right on this. I'm curious about this one. One to buy low, you have DJ Moore. Is this because of a quarterback change because Baker is out for a couple weeks, or is this because you think he might get unloaded?
Well, I'm wearing Carolina blue because DJ Moore wakes up this morning and it's like Christmas. Matt Rule's been fired and Baker Mayfield is injured. It can't get any better for this. We all know DJ Moore is talented. He's currently wide receiver 47. Things can only get better for him, Gill, whether it's PJ Walker or whatever is going on offense, or he gets traded. He's been alleviated from Rule and Mayfield.
See, this is the difference between fantasy and betting because I have never been more sad with the Matt Rule, Baker Mayfield, Kinyella. Never more sad. And then finally, one to sell high.
Let's sell Hollywood from the Arizona Cardinals. He's currently wide receiver 7 in my scoring settings for the season, but I don't think this is sustainable, Gill. Kyler Murray leads the NFL in attempts, so that can only go down. He's off 3 big games in a row, so you can sell that. He's against Seattle this week. You can sell that. Someone can get excited about it. And maybe that someone also doesn't realize DeAndre Hopkins returns next week. I think this is a great time to sell Hollywood Brown and get back RB1 value and maybe a wide receiver flex type player in exchange.
All right, real quick. I know we're talking about things you got right. How about Austin Eckler, though, Todd? He looked pretty good, and you didn't like him a couple weeks ago.
No, I didn't, and I surprised you with that. And you know what, Gill? I like to be accountable on this segment because I listen to you guys. I watch you guys, and I know in the past you guys have taken shots at other fantasy people who don't admit when they're wrong. I want to admit when I'm wrong in these segments, and I was wrong 2 weeks ago about Austin Eckler not being productive. Since then, he has as many touchdowns the last 2 weeks as Taysom Hill. Let's throw that in there as well. So, yes, Austin Eckler is up to running back 4 right now. I told you to sell high on him last week. Maybe got a ton in return, but I was wrong.
All right, I appreciate that. And then finally, in the 30 seconds here on this, we talk about what do you do on a trade if you get a bad trade offer. Ghosting is one of the options you had. That happened in your league this week?
Well, I don't like ghosting because I don't understand it. Gil, if you're going to make someone a trade offer, they don't like it, then click the box that says decline or reject trade. Don't ghost it like it's a bad one-night stand and you don't want to talk to the person. At least let everybody move on with their life. I've admonished owners in my league who look at a trade, don't like it, and then just don't respond to it. I don't like ghosting for any reason.
The kids love ghosting, Todd. I don't know what's with them, but I'm with you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it as always. Todd Wright, everybody.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.